Can you believe it?
The first air battles were fought by pilots with pistols. Let's take a look at the development of military aviation aircraft. 11 years after the Wright brothers' first flight. The First World War begins. Some modifications have been made to the aircraft at this time. The military found them useful for reconnaissance missions. Before the plane showed up, reconnaissance missions are all carried out by people on horseback. It's very slow. The range is still small. Despite the opposition of some traditionalists in the military, but aircraft have a clear advantage against the enemy. And there was opportunity for growth. Military aircraft fly over enemy positions to spy on the enemy. Photography is the main method of investigation. But it's not easy, because flying without navigation equipment and accurate maps is a big challenge. Soon the military began to use new technologies. This was the earliest air-to-air combat, when the two reconnaissance pilots met in flight. The pilot will pull out the pistol he is carrying and fire the guard. But the firepower of a pistol is limited. Engineers began to try to install machine guns on aircraft. So here's another problem. Mounting the machine gun directly in front of the pilot makes it easy to aim and shoot. But the shot will hit the propeller. Make it unusable. The machine gun is mounted on the top and it is difficult to aim. An ingenious solution by engineer Fm.WorldNews solves this puzzle. This is the first aircraft to be equipped with synchronous gears. This allows for shooting through the propeller without causing any damage. As the war continued, hand-dropped bomblets became an alternative. As the aircraft advanced in weaponry, defense mechanisms such as anti-aircraft artillery also developed. Commonly known as jerking off, if you are an inexperienced pilot, there is a high chance of being shot down by the enemy. And the question then was, if your plane was going to crash, it means you will fall with the plane. Even if you survive the first attack, it's a horrible way for a pilot to die. It was also a terrible loss that the Air Force could not afford, because pilots were generally much more expensive than airplanes at the time. Although parachutes were invented long before airplanes were invented. And a parachute was clearly a viable option. But the use of parachutes is highly controversial. The only people allowed to use a parachute were the observers on the airboat. Because they are still using gas. Often gets hit and catches fire and falls from the sky. The parachute is the only device that protects the lives of its members. And for the plane, not most planes have small cockpits. There was no room for the parachute. And doing an emergency escape operation in a space like this would be extremely difficult. The main thing is, senior commanders believe that the use of parachutes would enable pilots to parachute out in a crisis situation. Rather than facing the enemy. They also say that heavy parachutes can affect the aircraft's fuel efficiency and performance. In 1918, the German Air Force became the first country in the world to introduce a standard parachute. It was also the only one at that time. Construction technology never ceased to be developed during the war. Most airplanes at that time were made of wood. It's covered with fabric. The most common type is a biplane. It is loved by the public for its powerful and familiar structure. But as engineers learned more about aerodynamics, they found that a single aircraft was more efficient than a biplane or trinity. Soon, a number of single aircraft were successfully deployed on the front lines of the war. But these types of aircraft require a complex array of struts and wires to maintain the structural strength of the wing. Especially in demanding maneuvers. However, these problems were solved through the use of new materials and construction techniques, such as metallic aluminum and the internal structure inside the wing. So slowly you don't need struts or wires anymore. There are no good pilots. Airplanes are nothing. Manfred von Richthofen was one of the most famous fighter pilots of World War I. He is regarded as a German ace Air Force pilot during World War I. The official record of air combat victories is 80. As the war continued, aircraft expanded the scope of the war. Cities hundreds of miles from the front lines are exposed to these deadly planes. Before the advent of plane bombing, only Zeppelins are likely to perform these missions. But its Pauline airship is slower than an airplane. It's much easier to shoot them down. As World War I drew to a close, the aircraft reached a maximum speed of 241 kilometers per hour. As funding for military aviation development dwindles. So in the 1920s, civil aviation took over the challenge of speed and distance records. A major event was the Schneider Trophy. His original intention was to encourage technological progress in civil aviation, but then it became a pure speed race. This competition is of great significance to the development of aircraft design. especially in the field of aerodynamics and engine design. The competition featured seaplanes. The last Schneider Trophy was held in 1931. The winner was the British fighter who flew the Super Mabel S-6B, which reached a speed of 610 kilometers per hour. These aircraft far exceeded any military aircraft at the time. The most significant change in the new fast aircraft is the engine. The power cylinder arrangement and overall aerodynamics make the aircraft slimmer to reduce air drag. But it also brings up a lot of other problems. As the engine cools, the most common type of engine is the mirror type, where all cylinders are exposed to direct airflow. But this comes at the cost of more air resistance, so you can't go faster. On the other hand, inline cylinder engines can generate less air resistance. But the air cooling effect is not ideal. Therefore, an additional liquid cooling system is required. Radiators must be used for development. On the S-6B, the engine is cooled by pipes on both sides of the fuselage and another radiator on the wings. Germany did not participate in the Schneider competition, because after the war they agreed not to build aero engines larger than a fixed size. So they don't have high-speed planes yet. Until 1933, the Nazi regime joined the treaty at the time, ignoring the old treaties. An aircraft design competition has been held to select the best fighter jet. The winner was the Bf-109, a single-seat, single-engine monoplane all-metal fighter designed by Willy Messerschmitt. Britain also introduced a formidable opponent, the Spitfire, a year later. This is a new generation of fighter jets. He would change the course of World War II. The Hawk Hurricane was also a simple but great British fighter. Its simplicity relies on the use of classic wood and plant construction. And he can make it faster and cheaper. The United States entered the war with FRA Buffalo fighter jets. But it's an outdated airplane. Overweight and unstable, especially when compared to the Japanese rival 30A60 fighter. But the F-4F Wildcat replaced him in the battle. Later, it was also used by the F-6F Hellcat Mustang. P-51 and other aircraft replaced. There is one feature in the history of military aviation that is crucial to air superiority. Faster means you get there faster and you get out faster. Germany is very advanced in aviation technology. They began testing rockets and unmanned aerial bombs. They created Mi-163. It's basically a rocket-powered airplane. It's the only operational rocket-powered fighter. It was also the first aircraft to fly more than 1,000 kilometers per hour horizontally in a manned aircraft. The problem is that his flight time is short. But the next generation of engines will revolutionize aviation. Jet engines can achieve faster speeds. The 178th Heinkel was the first turbojet. But the most common jet during World War II was the Mi-262. The post-war development of aviation was quite advanced. The pursuit of speed continues. As the transistor leads, airborne computers and avionics allow for more precise control of flight systems. And today, aviation technology is mature. The onboard computer will assist the pilot in controlling the aircraft.